Ultimate Music Theory teachers. I'm so excited to share some really cool tips with you today. And I'm talking about dominant seventh chords, how to write them, what are they called, where do they go, and what about the hug? Well, if you're doing the Ultimate Music Theory Advanced Rudiments workbook, you're learning about dominant seventh chords. So let me ask you a question. When you're writing dominant seventh chords, are you confused about which notes go in which order and how you write them? Well, share that with me if you would, because we're about to have a great reveal. My name's Germain from Ultimate Music Theory, and I'm about to reveal. Plus, we've got a pop quiz today. So let's think about dominant seventh chords. Oh, good morning, Jim. Great to see you here. Dominant seventh chords can really be confusing because we want to know, what are they called? What's the lowest note? When we're writing them in inversions, where did the stems go? And what is the one key thing? I'm going to give you a great tip today that guarantees you're going to write these dominant seventh chords in the right order. So I'm excited. Hey, good morning. Christopher's here to join us. So let's get started with writing dominant seventh chords. So if you've ever started to write dominant seventh chords, we know it's a 4-note chord. So we're going to kind of walk you through a few steps. And I have one big reveal at the end. So you want to make sure to stay to the end. Our key word for the day is intervals. So what has that got to do with dominant seventh chords? Well, a dominant seventh chord, ta-da, is based on the 5th degree of a major scale or a minor scale. So we're going to talk about the dominant seventh chord based on the key of C major. So a 5th above C is G, which is the dominant. And we use Roman numerals, the uppercase. And what does that little number 7 mean? It means that 7 notes above the dominant is going to be our final note. So G, B, D, F. Now we might think, well, Glory, that's pretty easy if we're writing it in root position. But what happens when we're writing it in inversions? You can see I got all kinds of great tips for you today. So if you're confused about how to write dominant seventh chords, because we've got to kind of figure out what all these little numbers mean, go ahead and share with me what's the one thing that you think is confusing about dominant seventh chords, how you write them, how you play them. What's your one thing that kind of drives you crazy when you're trying to understand this concept and teach it? Because we as teachers need to be able to explain these concepts. So in the key of C major, our dominant seventh chord in root position is G, B, D, F. And you might wonder, well, what are all these colors about? Well, let's start off with the very first tip. So tip number 1, when we are writing an inversion, tip number 1, the first thing that we need to do is identify the lowest note. So in root position, the root is the lowest note. When we write this in first inversion, and remember, we've got 4 notes. Each one is an interval of a third apart when they're in root position, but things are about to change. So tip number 1, write the root note of first inversion. You can see here it's in blue, which is B. And we want to write that as low as possible because the other notes have to go above that. So tip number 1, you want to write it as low as possible. And here's another little pre-tip. Think about the stem direction. Where is the stem going to go? Will the stem go up on the right or will the stem go down on the left? Because we are writing in inversions and we need to know that these are going to be furthest away, stem down from the top note or stem up from the lower note. So this is the lowest note. So number 1, all the other notes need to be written above. That's step number 1. Now, the second tip, oh, I see lots of you are joining me. Hey, Sarah, great shout out to you today. And Ivy is here. Great shout out all the way from Hong Kong. She's one of our Ultimate Music Theory certified teachers. And Danica is on the call with us today. Fantastic. Thanks for joining me. So here is tip number 2. Are you ready for this one? The tip is this. Everybody loves a hug, right? When we're writing our dominant seventh chord inversions, we need to make sure that the hug is written with the lower note first and the higher note is written up to the right. So lower left, higher note is up to the right. So give me a little shout out. How do you write them as inversions? A great question, Christopher. So we're going to have our big reveal as to which one. So if you're paying attention to all the tips, you're going to get the right answers. So tip number 1 was write the root note and think about where the stem direction would go when you're adding the other notes, up or down. That's a little pre-tip. Tip number 2 is write the lower note of the hugging notes to the left, lower left, and then the right is going to be the higher note of the 2 hugging notes. And so here's now tip number 3. So tip number 3 is that we need to add the remaining note, right? So far we've got G, B, D, F. So in first inversion, B was at the bottom. In second inversion, D is at the bottom. And in third inversion, F is at the bottom. Now, here's the tip. When you're writing that final note, so you've written your first note, you've got your hug in there. Now you want to write in your last note. It always has to go above the root note. And sometimes students think, oh, I'll just put that D, I'll just put it down here. But now we've changed the inversion, right? So you might wonder, what's the big reveal? Are you ready for the big test? And then I have one tip for you that guarantees you're always going to write these correctly. It's a great tip. It's a bonus tip today. So let's talk about the one note. And I want you to go with me on this reveal and just type a yes, correct, or no for not correct. Here's the first one. When we look at the interval, and here's the big thing, is we need to add stems in order to see if it is written correctly. So I'm going to add my stem. Put that down here. I'm going to add my stem, and it's going to go down on the left. And so when we add our stem, we see that one note is kind of floating in outer space. He's not attached to anything. So if I was writing this, is it correct or incorrect? Let me see what you guys are thinking out there. Correct or incorrect? Oh, we've got lots of you on the calls today. Thank you. So this one note means it's written incorrectly. Let's have the reveal for the 5, 6, 5. So now if we're going to add our stem, I'll go ahead and use our stem. And now we can see this one is written correctly. Our hug is on the left, and our upper note determines the stem direction. All the stems are correctly lined up. Great job. Danica, that's correct, Danica. So let's go check. This one is correct. The next one, let's do the big reveal. 2 notes. So that looks good. Goofy. It does look goofy, right, Sarah? That's really goofy. So now 1 note would be incorrect. 2 notes. What happens now? Well, let's do the big reveal. Is this correct or incorrect? I'm going to add my little stem there. Oh, kind of messing up my board. Okay, so now if you have 2 notes that are on either side of the stem, is it correct? Say no. It's not correct. Let's reveal the right way to write our second inversion. When we're adding our stems, now we can see that this one is correct. Let's do a quick review. Our lowest note determines the stem direction. Our hug, our lower note is on the left, and the higher note is up on the right. That makes sense. So this one is correct. Ouch, Christopher. So finally, the third inversion. All right, let's have the big reveal. I'm not going to help you with this one. Just going to let you see if you can figure it out. What do you think? 3 notes, correct or incorrect? Let's reveal the next one. Which one do you think would be right? The first one or the second one? First one or second one, right? So what is your answer? Number 1 or number 2? Which one is correct? So how do we really determine if it's correct or incorrect? They kind of look, not too bad if you're thinking about music. But here is the big reveal, the big tip. The number 4 tip today is use a ruler and just line it up to determine if the stem direction would go up or down. So here's our ultimate music theory ruler, which we all love and must have. Oh, Danica says, the second one looks right to me. Okay, let's do the big reveal. Thanks, Danica. So now we've got our lower note on the left. Okay, so far so good. The lowest note is F, which in fact is the correct inversion, but now we need to add our stem. Now the note furthest away from the middle line would be our F. So that means F is the boss. So let's line this up, and let's line this one up here. So now what do we see? That looks so weird. When we have 3 notes on the wrong side of the stem, that's wrong. If we have our hug, who determines the stem direction because he's the lower note, and the other notes are lined up vertically correctly on the right side of the stem, that's the right answer. So let's do a quick review. When writing dominant 7th chords, and then I want to talk about what those numbers mean, because sometimes students think, oh, what is that? That's kind of confusing. So I'm going to give you a little tip with that one today too. So let me switch my pencils here because I like using pink. Aha, that's how it works. You're right, Sarah. So let's do the quick review. Tip number 1, write in the root note and think about where the stem direction is going to be when you're adding your other notes. Tip number 2 is that the hug always is the lower note on the left and the higher note is on the right. And tip number 3 is make sure that when you're adding that 4th note, that it always goes above the root note, never below, because then of course you're changing the inversion. All right. And then the bonus tip was use your ruler and line up your stems. So I want to share one more thing with you, and that is intervals. Now, why am I talking about intervals when we're talking about dominant 7th chords? And that's our key word today, is intervals. So if you want to learn more about dominant 7th chords and about the Ultimate Music Theory program, just go ahead and write in the word intervals in the chat. And our little Solabot, here's our little Solabot, you'll see her hanging out, and she sends all kinds of really cool little Tito tips and solaces and a couple of jokes now and then. So go ahead and add the word intervals, and our little Solabot will send you a bunch of information that I know you're going to find really, really useful. So now let's think about this. What are those numbers and what do they mean? Well, here it goes. When you have a dominant 7th chord, the interval above the root is a 7th. So we call this dominant and the number 7. That's pretty cool. When we have the 5, which is the dominant, and it says 6-5, those numbers mean the intervals above the root. So let's check it out. Here's an interval of a 6th, and here's an interval of a 5th. So this is the dominant 7th chord, and it has the 6th and the 5th. So that tells us that, yay, it's in first inversion. So go ahead and enter the word intervals, and we'll make sure to send you all these details. Let's check out the next one. So now we see it's in second inversion, and it says 5-4-3. What does the 4-3 mean? Intervals. That means that above the root note here, we have an interval of a 4th and then a 3rd. So that makes it so easy to look at these intervals and say, oh, I get it. Dominant 7th, interval of a 7th. Dominant 6-5, interval of a 6th and a 5th. Dominant 4-3, interval of a 4th and a 3rd. And you guessed it, dominant 4-2, intervals are a 4th and a 2nd. Yay! Isn't that easy? So now you know how to write dominant 7th chords and guarantee to always write them correctly. And remember, use your ruler. Dominant 7th chords are built on intervals, and their dominant 7th inversions change those intervals above the root. So love the blog too. Very helpful. Thanks, Sarah. Make sure that if you haven't already, enter the word intervals, and we'll send you the link for the dominant 7th Inversions blog. And this blog's written by Sheila McKibben-Uren, who is our co-author on some of the Ultimate Music Theory publications. And we have a lot of fun writing together. As I'm doing my Teaching Tuesdays, if there's something specific that you'd like to learn about or have me teach, please enter that in the chat box and share it with me, because I'd love to provide you with all of the little tips and tricks that Sol and Tito have to offer when we're learning music theory, because it just makes it more fun, right? So have a dominant day and make sure to enter the word intervals. And if you have any questions, Sarah says, love the blog, very helpful. Thank you. Hey, Tammy, nice to see you out here today. And Raylene, thank you. Danica, of course, is hanging out with us today. And Brenda, yay. And Sally, it's so great when we're kind of hanging out and learning more music theory things and tips and tricks. So make sure to enter the word intervals, and I will see you Ultimate Music Theory teachers in the next video. Have a great day, everybody. Sola says, don't forget to write intervals, and the Sola bot will send you the information. Have a great day. Thanks.